Hello. Today we are going to discuss the role of diversity and inclusion professional. Who is this person and why it's important to have such a person on board in any type of organization, from a big corporation to a little startup, from public to private sector. So, let's start. Before we start, let me introduce myself. I'm Evgenia and I'm a founder of a Spotlight agency, which is dealing exactly with that, with diversity and inclusion. They're helping organizations to integrate these concepts as a part of their DNA, as a part of their everyday routines and processes. Everything from HR issues to business development to branding and other areas. So let's discuss who this professional is. What does this role mean? As we say in Sweden, the child who is loved has many names. The same with diversity and inclusion professional. This role can be called in so many different ways. Everything from diversity and inclusion manager, to coach, to mentor, to consultant, to director, or it has maybe no name and it's just a part of HR job, HR professional task. So of course, the name depends on exact tasks and responsibility in the company and if this person is external or internal employee in the company. So what are the tasks? What are the areas of responsibilities of this person? There are normally three if we formalize the role. The first one is dealing with diversity. What is diversity? Diversity is, with simple words, representation. Representation of demographics in the area your company is, or maybe your industry, or like in your country. So basically the context you work in. And if, for example, you are living in Uppsala, like in a Swedish student town, which is very multinational, and there are a lot of profiles of potential employees, and you only employ middle-aged Ukrainian women like yourself, it means that you are not actually diverse. You are not finding the workforce which is representing the area you live in. The second role diversity and inclusion expert works with is equity. What is equity? It is about access to opportunities, to information, and to resources. We all know that it is not equal how these opportunities, how this access is distributed in the society. It is more accessible for one group than the others. So the role of the specialist is to measure how access looks like in the organization and also to help find strategy how to optimize this process, how to increase equity, how to open up opportunities and access to underrepresented groups. So this is the second area of responsibility. And third, which is most fun but most difficult one, is about inclusion. If the first two areas are more like formalized, it's so easy to measure, to check with statistics, quantity, quality. The third one is more difficult but most important. It's called inclusion. Without inclusion, diversity is only tokenism. Without inclusion, which is all about feeling of belonging, feeling of being heard and seen in this organization, which is all about behavior. Without this component, without this ingredient, diversity is just about tokenism, that I just took one individual, employ this person to represent a certain group, but this person maybe doesn't feel that great in my organization, and all other people maybe don't accept this person as a part of the team. So this is an extremely important component, an area of responsibility of diversity and inclusion manager. If we speak about history of this role, when did it appear and why did it appear? So it's not a secret that US is the mother of diversity and inclusion professional role as it is, like formalized professional role. Otherwise, if it was in Europe and in other parts of the world as a part of corporate social responsibility, then it's originally HR who takes care of that. So diversity and inclusion as a separate profession appeared in US in 70s and 80s, and it was the social need, the social demand which created this role. because it was not enough to have corporate social responsibility or charity, or just to have it between the lines a little bit quick as a part of HR. It was a need expressed by society to really deal openly, to measure, follow up, and visualize both diversity, equity, and inclusion, how it works. And then organizations start to deal with it. In Europe, it came a bit later, like in 2000, and it came through big corporations which spread their offices all over the world, and those offices which from US came to Europe, then Europe started to open their eyes for this role as well. Unfortunately, it is still, at least in Europe, I know this context very well as I've been working not only in Sweden but in many countries. Unfortunately, in Europe, this role is still sometimes is integrated like a very casual part of HR, like this soft part of HR. And why? Why is that? It's because many companies see this role as purely checking the box role. What does it mean? It's all about maturity, the level of maturity of the organization when it comes to diversity and inclusion. So the first level of maturity is a pure legal compliance. How does my organization comply with laws in my country, with international laws, and with all those UN agendas and conventions? So I need to legally comply, and I don't want legal consequences if I don't comply. So HR does that. HR is responsible to make sure that the organization complies. And that's why it's still, many organizations sees this role and sees this task like this, like a pure compliance of diversity and inclusion. Those organizations which are more mature, who want to really integrate these concepts as a part of their daily routine, as a part of their processes, to attract the best teams, to have more diverse markets for their diverse products, to have the better branding out there, both for their customers, but also going back to attracting the best teams. Those organizations which are more aware, then they have a specific role, a specific task, a person who is responsible for dealing exactly with these issues. And for me, I'm always amazed how thoroughly we plan our business part, our financials. We have like a financial person who is accountable, who is responsible, who plans, measures, follows up, and reports. And when it comes to diversity, we think like, fine, let's participate in that training. Let's train all my staff in something when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, which will make them great, which will make them aware, and which I tick the box, done. But it's not how it works. It doesn't work with money. It doesn't work with people, because D&I, diversity and inclusion, is all about people, both your employees and your customers. So many organizations, which I've already mentioned, who are aware, they have a specific role, and those who are most successful ones, we know about that because they are not only good in doing this inside the organization, but they are also good in marketing, in showing to the world like, look, this is what we are doing with diversity and inclusion. And those managers, they represent the company, they know how to show and what to show to the world. There is a model which is called Diversity and Inclusion Maturity Model, or Diversity and Inclusion Compliance Model. So this model shows different steps of maturity of the organization when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, which ultimately leads also to belonging. It means how people feel inside of this organization, how employees feel. So it's about organizational culture, belonging. So these organizations which are aware, they have a certain role, who is responsible to measure, to plan, to follow up, and to report the progress. And also these companies are normally proud of their results, and they want to show these results to the world. They want to have diversity and inclusion as a part of their branding identity, for showing to their stakeholders, to their clients, like, look, this is how we work, and also to attract the best talents, because who doesn't want to work in the organization who is inclusive, and who is diverse, and where you will feel at home, where you will feel belonging. So, for example, big names which I can come up right now, I can dedicate a special video when we can exactly look on good practices and from inside how it's structured, how it works. But just to mention some names, like drop some names which are important to, or which are successful in the field. I think it's IKEA and it's Essity. Both organizations have exact role, the managers, they're responsible, and not one. They have local responsible professional for diversity and inclusion, they have regional, and they have global. So it's really covered in all locations they work. Remember, we said not one size fits all. So this is exactly how they're thinking, that every context is unique, and this diversity and inclusion manager or professional needs to study that context and to make things work exactly in that context, to localize the concept, to operationalize the concepts. So these organizations have these professionals who are dealing from A to Z, from measurement to planning, to strategizing, to training, to following up, and to making a new planning and go back to square one, because these issues, diversity, equity, and inclusion, exactly like financials, exactly like HR or branding, it's a never-ending process. It needs to be a part of your everyday life and a circle, your yearly circle. So, of course, there is a big difference if diversity, equity, and inclusion is a part of your HR manager responsibility, and what most companies do who are working like that. They have a yearly survey where they anonymously ask all the employees, like, how are you feeling? Do you feel belonging? Are you proud to work here? Have you ever felt discriminated? And all questions like this. They have this huge survey. They ask and urge all employees to answer that survey. And then, in the best case, they present the results like, look, we are not totally diverse, or we are not totally inclusive, or we are totally diverse and inclusion. And that's all. Then there is a report on that. In the worst case scenario, it's not even reported back. It's something you do in order to comply with legal obligations in your country. But if you have a dedicated professional whose task is to actually integrate these issues into a daily life, then it's much more than this annual survey. Then it's like the whole circle of what I've just described, from measuring to planning to strategizing, training, and checking. So those organizations are far like ahead of those competitors who are just dealing like check the box strategy to put this issue as a part of HR task. And I don't misunderstand me, it's not wrong to have it as HR task. It's okay. For a smaller company, maybe it's too expensive to put this task on a separate person and to pay the whole salary for D&I. And maybe it's too expensive to employ the person from outside. So it can be a part of HR, but it needs to be like a very clear, accountable task. Like the task which is, when you give this task, this person has with responsibility gets a freedom to actually implement it, and you actually ask as a manager, okay, what is the result of this part of your role? Where are we when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion? What is our plan? How we are going to deal with that in practice? How we will measure it? And what is our next step? What is our next circle? So if it's not that clearly expressed, if it's just like, yeah, basically you are responsible, you are doing it like you wish, like you like, nothing will happen. We all know that, because no one's responsibility means that nothing is done. So when I created Spotlight 3 years ago, I created this agency out of frustration, because being in these different positions in public sector, in private sector, and as owner of my own business, I've been very interested in how to make equity, diversity, and inclusion a real part of my organization, a real part of my work, how to integrate it as a part of my everyday routine. But it's very hard to find something concrete, a concrete help for me as business owner or as a manager in this issue. I've been in so many trainings, And most of those trainings were great. They were brilliant. They really described this concept which I described at the beginning of my video brilliantly, with brilliant examples and inspiration. So you're sitting in this training and you're feeling, yes, great, yes, this is something I really want. I really want this as being a part of my manager role, or I want this to be a part of my organization and really make these things work for me. But then you go back to your manager seat or you to HR seat and nothing happens, because very rarely in the training you get the tools as what to do, how to deal with it practically in your situation, in your context. And why it's not possible to get this tool in the training? The answer is simple, because training itself is a tool. Training is not a panacea, is not like a magical pill to solving your problems with inequality or with discrimination. It's actually just a tool. And this tool needs to be used wisely in the context when you really understand why you are using it, for what, for whom. How will you measure the results of this training? And also, how does this training resonate with me and my team? What do I want them to know? What do I want to learn myself? So that's why, like, these out of context general trainings, majority of which are great, very inspirational, very fun to see, they're not working. And there is a big body of research on that, at least in the US. That training as a separate tool is not a solution to diversity and inclusion issues and problems in your organization. It needs to be settled and put in a wider context. So this is exactly why I started Spotlight. I wanted to create for myself, for my team, a very, very concrete step-by-step approach when I integrate these concepts in my routines. And I also wanted to help other organizations to do that. I want really, with this concrete how-to and learning approach, which I'm working with in Spotlight and together with my team, I want to go to the higher level of maturity in the organization. From this pure compliance level to awareness, which is the next step, to having it as a part of my organization, like a formal part of my organization, with a concrete manager responsible, with accountability routine, with measurement process, and all these other routines and parts of having D&I as an official part of your organization, towards the highest level, which is called integration, when it's so natural for you as to breathe. It's so natural for you as to take a coffee break to work with D&I. And this is what we are working in Spotlight Agency. And this is why we wanted to create this channel for you, Spotlight Community, exactly to share our insights. And also, it's very fun if we get feedback from you, like insights, like what are you dealing with and what are your good examples and solutions, because it's like no one knows everything. But if we come together, if we brainstorm, if we share, we become every day a little bit wiser and closer to this highest level of D&I, which is integration. So yes, it was a little bit about Spotlight, and but I wanted to show, like with the Spotlight example, that there we take diversity and inclusion manager role very seriously. We have a coordinator whom we dedicate, it's an external role in our case, whom we dedicate the process, who is responsible for the whole process in our client's organization. We write an agreement together with other client, and then we help them step by step to deal with those issues. And then by doing this one or two such circles, we are making this circle work. We are making this circle a natural part, a natural routine in this organization. And then we leave. Then our mission is done. And then that is the best moment when this happens. For some organizations it's shorter, for some it's longer. And it's nothing bad about taking a little bit longer time, because no one is naturally racist or no one is naturally discriminatory against a certain group. What is happening, why we are not working with it consciously and more efficiently, is all about lack of knowledge and lack of time. Because if I'm working with a production, if I'm industry manager, I produce cars. I'm very much focused on cars production. I'm very much focused on sales. I'm very much focused on improving my product, selling my product, finding new markets and all these issues, financials. So my staff has enough salary and stuff like this. So what I don't understand that it's how I can make diversity and inclusion my friend, my partner, to make all these processes even better. Not just a new instance, I need to tick the box because I must, it's a law. No, it's for making this process, everything else I do, smoother, more efficient, more inclusive, more fun, both for me and my staff. So the last moment, which is important in description of the role of diversity and inclusion manager, is if this manager is external, coming from another organization, or if it's internal colleague. And there is a big difference in two ways. First is knowledge about organization. Internal professional, internal expert, of course, knows organization much better than external one. They know all the processes, all the routines, how organization works from inside, people, managers, and also with a cup of coffee, in lunches, they hear all these problems and issues people rise. So it's very much knowledge, very many insights, which external expert doesn't have. From the other side, when external expert comes in, this expert comes with fresh new eyes. They see everything from a zoom out perspective, from a bird perspective. They see maybe biases and problems which internal manager doesn't see anymore, because if you're part of something every day, you stop to see it. Like parents most often don't even realize that their kids are growing because they see the kids every day. But when someone else is coming, like, oh God, your boy or a girl is already so big, and you're like, what? I don't even notice that. So the same is with organizations, the same is with D&I. Like, you don't see some issues simply because you're too close to them. And that's why it's beneficial to have external experts sometimes. Another big area, another big issue when these two roles differ is trust. Many times when you work too close to people, when you know them, when maybe they're your friends or colleagues whom you meet every day, in this case, people have more difficult to open up, to tell about something which really bothers them. And many people from underrepresented groups, many workers from underrepresented groups maybe find it difficult to share something with the internal expert, because maybe this expert knows someone they want to share about, maybe someone is discriminatory or bullying colleague, and then this colleague is a friend of internal expert of internal diversity and inclusion manager. Then in most of the cases, it's very difficult to share unless maybe it's a conflict and everyone already knows about this conflict. So it's really popping up to the surface. And from the other side, external person comes in. Maybe there are no relationship and you need to build this trust. You need to build these first steps towards people's hearts. But at the same time, what I found and what I see very often when I come as external expert, people share more gladly, more openly, because in most cases they see me for the first time, and in most cases they will never meet me again. I'm there just temporarily to make this analysis, to help them to develop the strategy to make things work, and then I leave. So it's much more easier to share their pain with me. So it depends really on each organization needs, but if you have possibility, if you have capacity, and if you have a need to invite external expert at least sometime, like from time to time, is very beneficial to you, just to revise, to see everything with fresh eyes. So we are reaching the end of this video. We have been talking about the role of diversity and inclusion manager in the organizational context. It can be internal or external professional, but their areas of responsibilities are more or less similar, is to make sure that diversity, equity and inclusion work as a part of organizational practice, as a part of their DNA. What we have not discussed that much is why it's important and why is this role emerging now more and more in Europe, at least. In US, it's a long story. They are much more ahead of us in these matters. Why is becoming more and more important? It's because the market is changing. The consumers on the market are really more and more aware about what products they buy and from whom they buy. If you're an organization which doesn't care about your image, about your brand, most likely you will lose a lot of customers who do care about these issues. And also, it's about the talent chase. Now, when the world is getting smaller and more global and the talents are moving, it's much easier to find good talent because, the sky's the limit and you have the whole globe to recruit from, depending, of course, on your area of work. But it's also much more difficult because the workers whom you are recruiting, they are more and more aware to why I want to work for this employer. And salary is only one part of the story. Many people actually consciously choose organizations they are comfortable to work with. Organizations which give them this feeling of belonging and also favorable conditions to grow and favorable conditions to combine work with their parentship. And there are many issues outside of work which are very important and they are correlating with our workplaces. So it's no escape anymore. You cannot just by offering higher salary get the best talent. It's not working like that anymore. And people are changing jobs more and more quickly, more dynamically nowadays compared to for 40 years ago, someone worked at the factory for 40 years. This doesn't happen anymore. People work 2-3 years, then they change until they find a place where they really can grow and when they really feel they belong. And so this is the part of era we live in. And it's no escape, as I said, from that. I could compare diversity and inclusion with sustainability a little bit in this matter. For 15 years, sustainability was a bit of a fun thing to work with, a part of a hobby for organization. Those people who worked with sustainability, they were called tree huggers, activists who are standing on barricades and let's save the planet and let's do it. Let's all unite around this mission to save the earth, otherwise our children has no future. And everyone who businesses looked at them yeah, it's very cute that you are doing this, it's amazing, but you are surely earning no money on that. Then with time, sustainability became a real part of the business game. It's no project you can get, it's no tender you can win, and no clients you can attract without being sustainable. You really need to have a policy and your strategy which works. It's not perfect, of course, it's always room for improvement, but it's taken seriously. And it is a lot of money in this area of sustainability, both in consultancy and also companies selling their services, working with sustainability service and products. So now diversity and inclusion is somewhere sustainability was for 15 years ago. Diversity and inclusion experts, these professionals, are invited to different events, to different conferences to inspire people, to show look, we can live in better society. Look, we are doing this and that and let's do it together. And many times these experts are not even paid. Companies expect come and inspire us, but they look at something like your hobby, you're doing it for fun. No, it's not a hobby. It's a very important issues we are talking about here. And it's as important as sustainability, but I guess we are not there yet, but it's becoming more and more obvious that it's on the map now for many companies, for those who realize what it means to them. So now we are reaching the end of this video. We have discussed the role of diversity and inclusion professional, what it means in a workplace context, and why it's important in a workplace context, and why it's important to take it seriously. Not as a ticks the box theory, not as a tree hugging approach, but really seriously. So if you find this video interesting, please follow us on Spotlight Community. Please share your pain. or your gain, your good examples. We are really happy to communicate and to share these experiences together with you. And thank you for me. I see you in the next video. Bye.